Welcome to Learning About Dogs, a podcast featuring Laurence. This is a podcast for people who love learning about dogs. Wow, are you in the right place? I'm Sue McGuire, a Taco graduate and a longtime manager of a canine behavior program at a nonprofit animal shelter near San Francisco. On this season, we have been spending a great deal of time chatting about rewards. It does benefit you greatly to take a listen to the podcast at the start of Season 3 to gain an understanding of why rewards and reward processes are so important to our understanding of how we can benefit our life with dogs. In this episode, Laurence and I chat about active learning and habits. When do you want active learning, and when do you want your learner to tap into a habit? There are advantages and drawbacks to both approaches. There was one line in active learning and habits that kind of popped out at me, and you say that training is about two processes: building a moment of choice or desire for the predictable reward, and building a habit that doesn't stop to consider the reward value. And that kind of threw me a little bit.
Mm.
It's not an either or scenario, is it? Habits and active learning. Does it happen at the same time? Does it happen one after the other? What are you talking about?
Well, in a way, they're not. So, a habit and active learning are not the same
Okay.
thing. So, you could see. So, if your dog was doing something and you clicked, out of habit, they would probably eat what you give them. That's not the same as actively seeking what you're going to give them.
Okay.
Does that make a
Okay.
difference? So, if I say things a certain way, because my dogs have got a long history of responding to spin, turn, lie down, walk this way, come here, la 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 la, out of habit, they'll respond to that tone of voice. That doesn't mean to say they are going, oh, that means I'm going to get a treat. Yes, it's like, yes, I'm responding to that. Am I going to get a treat? Oh, yeah, I did get a treat. So some things you want them to respond without thinking, what's in it for me? Yep. And some things you want them to think, no, I need to do this now so that I can earn A, B, or C. So um,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of a way. So, say for instance, uh, it might not be a good example, but it'll give you one to start with. So, I changed gear when I had a gear lever car. As I'm coming up to a roundabout, I know I have to change gear so that I don't have to brake too heavily at the roundabout. If you use the gears in such a way consciously, you could save petrol. If you do it just as a habit, you'll tend to wait until the engine's making a certain noise and then you'll respond to it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
You get the idea? What else am I thinking of? Something that you tend to respond to without conscious thought will be called a habit. Something that you respond to with conscious thought is active learning. But what keeps the learning active is the anticipation of the reward you're going to get. So a habit is something you tend to do on a memory of getting a reward, as opposed to consciously going, oh, if I do this, I'm going to save money on petrol in the car. Or if I change down now, I have more chance of accelerating past this car.
Okay. Okay.
I can't think of the best
Well,
analogy.
it's sort of like you a habit doesn't necessarily tap into the specific reward that might be in play. It is, oh, there will be a reward,
Mhm.
but it's not specificity.
Yeah,
Correct? Yeah.
yeah. So if you do the washing up, you probably tend to do it the same way every day, and you haven't changed that format of doing it in several years until something happens that forces you to change. Well, what could happen is probably what you were doing stops being the reward it used to be. So I was trying to think of examples of this.
Hmm.
So if you had so say you had a new washing up tool. If you think back 20 or 30 years, you washed up a certain way, but then we got these taps that you can pull out that have like fresh water
Okay.
in,
Yeah.
you know? And so if I had a kitchen sink that wasn't just a straight two taps, bowl, draining board, but one of these taps you pull out that's on like an
Oh,
extendable
okay.
cord,
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you'd call them. Now, if I had to learn to wash up with that, I would be actively learning because my reward would have changed.
Hmm.
I've got to get more out of this. So if I'm training the dog to do something, we've told that you've got to practice it loads and loads and loads of times to get it right. But there's a point when you're practicing that the dog stops active learning. So do we. So I was taking through an exercise of handwriting. Now, when you're learning to write, you are actively learning to form letters in a certain shape. And you're learning to use your perceptive skills, your motor skills within your hand, your perceptive skills as to how many words you can get towards the end of the page, what height the lines are, whether you write a word and then go back across the T, or whether you do it as you break the word up, all the different things that you're making decisions about. If you just focus on the handwriting, you would be more attentive to what you're actually doing, particularly if you were going to be assessed on the neatness or the quality of what you're actually writing as the formation of lettering. But most of us are handwriting as a habit, because when we're handwriting, we're taking notes, or we're making reminders, or we're listening to something to write down, and it's purely a side activity to us thinking about something else. We might be trying to write something original. We're not focused on the actual process of writing, so we tend to write as a habit.
Okay. All right.
That makes sense. So that's, our brain is now not focused on the quality of the writing, but our brain is mostly focused on the content of what we're writing. So that writing goes to habit state.
So when we're interacting with our dogs, I would like to think that there are some things that I do want to become habit, and there are some things. I mean, you can't stay in active learning all the time, can you?
So what do you want to become a habit?
Loading into the car, go to your spot in the car. Uh,
What happens if you change cars?
yeah, that'll be different. Yes. Okay. So then it kicks into active learning, right?
Well, it depends. If you're going through something with half a mind on it, when are you most likely to make a
Yeah.
mistake?
When you have half a mind on it, we're not paying attention.
Yeah. So if you're writing, handwriting is probably the simplest skill. If you're trying to take notes and you're going too fast, you will lose quality.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Yep.
pretty obvious. The faster you try and write, the harder it becomes to read what you're trying to say. If you are tired, it will go bad.
Yes.
Yep. If you are focused on something else as you're doing the writing, yes, it will go bad. So a habit is unlikely to stay at the same level of quality, yes, if it goes into that sort of secondary, don't pay any attention to it. The same as car driving. How many people have turned up at a place thinking, I have no memory of
Yeah.
arriving here? Well, you were driving then as a habit. Now, driving, the actual mechanics of driving your car, I have no problem with you making that a habit, that you look over your shoulder before you indicate. Yes, when you get in, you put your seatbelt on before you reverse out the drive. Um, so you want certain things to become habits that you do a certain way, so that they become, if the habit, if the routine breaks down, your mind will alert to, oh, that feels a bit different. Have you ever tried to drive a car and not put your seatbelt on? It's very
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
And it.
So then
Yep.
that habit is worthwhile in the sense that your pattern of doing something a certain way is broken. You could become alert to it. But if you're doing your pattern the same way every day and not being alert to the repetition of that pattern, something can happen that you were not paying attention to, and this is where it goes wrong. So your traffic is something you should always be actively learning,
Okay.
but the actual mechanics of driving the car are the habit.
Okay. So
Habits tend to have a bit of a bad rep, but these are, if you like, activities that are working in other parts of your mind while something else is going on somewhere else. Handwriting is the
right.
example. Driving the car while you're focused on traffic. You want the driving of the car to become a habit so that you can devote all your attention to the traffic. Musicians obviously learn how to play and move their hands and do all the mechanical aspects of it so they can focus on the emotional aspect of what they're trying to draw out.
Mm.
So absolutely, so for dogs, asked to do maybe hunting an area for a scent, most of that stuff will be habits. Yes, so they can focus on the reading of the wind. Does that
Okay.
make sense? So if a dog was searching something like a rubble area or an earthquake area, they would have learnt how to be assessing the environment, what looks safe, whether they can jump down here, climb up here, and all those bits and pieces of how to move their bodies. Those have become good habits that we train them to be careful on how they move so they can focus on reading the wind. Probably something like agility is habits in the way the dog jumps in a certain physical way so that they can focus on where to go next when they're jumping.
Exactly. Okay.
So a habit is something we learn to a certain level, and then it goes further down the brain hierarchy of our attentiveness so we can be attentive on something else. They often there's that wonderful Big Bang Theory episode where Sheldon wants to push his mind up to higher thinking, so he wants to go and take on jobs that are mindless. Yes, so he gets an application to go and do rock sheet.
Yeah.
The stuff you put in the
Oh,
building,
sheetrocking.
putting
Yeah,
up rock
sheetrock.
sheet,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sheetrocking, yes. And he never, yeah, yes, that sounds fine. Is it mine? Absolutely, that'll do me. And then he says, "What's sheetrock?" So he ends up clearing the tables at the cafe place. So, I mean, I've often had some of my best ideas when I'm cutting the grass.
Okay.
I've gone into that mechanical, don't pay attention to up and down and up and down and empty out and up and down and I'm really thinking this and thinking that and doing this and doing that. So there's absolutely a purpose behind building habits. What do we want the dog to do as a habit? Yeah, and when do we want them to do something without thought? So we might layer up the learning. So if you're training a young dog for agility, you build a habit of running a certain way down a dog walk or running a certain way through the weave poles.
Okay.
The tricky thing is learning never stays the same. And often it's the hardest job to keep something consistent. So we train a dog to do something. It's going to do this for the next 9 years. Maybe, some sports thing where the dog sits to heel every time you do sensor, close your feet together, or it jumps a certain way. But as the rewards vary, so will the learning. And the rewards have got to vary, otherwise the learning will just go stale. And when it goes stale, it's not staying the same. So that fresh dog that's just learnt how to do this, and on the rise of that curve, those are the ones that often come up with the best stuff. The dogs that have been doing it for years and years and years and years and years, half asleep on the job. So when you've really got all those skills going at their best, they're all fitting together, and you've got that fluency and flow, that's often when those things are at their best. Then they start to become habits, and we stop paying attention to the quality. And I bet if you did this handwriting exercise, you'd realize that your handwriting is not as good as it was 40 years ago. Because we stopped paying attention to it. It just serves its purpose. Can I read it? Then that's fine. But what does it look like as a piece of work?
So, what does this look like for our daily training? How do we get?
So say, it's a lot of it's connected to the reward. So if I give the dog the cue to go to the target, she goes to the target, cool, oh, a reward. And there's something about that first reward that has more power than any other reward. That's cool, she says. And I throw that reward somewhere else. And now she's coming in from somewhere else, or I've made it slightly harder. And she keeps responding. So as I give the cue, and I might have 2 or 3 targets, and she responds to go to this target, go to that target, responding to the targets, going to the target's habit, taking the food starts to become a habit. But at some point, that food stopped being as good as it was when she first got it. Part of the fact that food starts to fill you up. So it's a little bit like going out to eat at a restaurant and you've waited 20 minutes and it's come. That first mouthful when you tasted something that was anticipated. Oh, wow. Oh, goodness me. Now, if you just keep eating the same thing, so we say it takes 12 mouthfuls, is it still as good on the 12th one?
No, I would not think so.
Or have you transitioned? 6, you are actively aware of what you're eating. 2 or 3, yes, it's still yeah. And the last 3, you just cleared the plate as a habit. So the repetition of something can tend to fade the value of the reinforcer, and we just keep doing it as a habit, but we're actually, the reinforcer is not doing what it was. Yes, the food, yes, it was very nice. And if you asked me afterwards, I say it was really delicious. But I'm going on the memory of that first mouthful, not on the last mouthful.
So you say habits. I'm still wrapping my brain around this. Habits almost need to happen before satiation.
The habit is built up before you become full, before you stop responding.
Okay. So what is that?
So, okay, what's the most delightful meal that you could sit down and anticipate?
I'm going out to brunch with girlfriends today. I'm not quite sure what's going to be on the meal, but the activity of sitting down with girlfriends is. Yeah.
Okay, so would it be a top quality lasagna, or you're going to go for a plum souffle? I mean, what's the thing you're going to go,
Yeah.
ooh? And it just makes you
Yeah.
stop for a moment when you take that
Okay,
first
yeah.
mouthful. What's that thing? I mean, we do talk about a lot of
Yeah, we
food
do,
on this,
but
but
that's us.
it's one of the best ways of actually, but training and eating are sort of repetitive things that go round and round in
And
circles
we
every
are
day. Yeah.
trainable.
Okay, some superb fresh bread.
Yes.
I had some bread the other day that was a walnut and cranberry.
Ooh.
And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that was such a surprise. But if I had it every day, it would stop being that pleasure, that initial. It would still give me pleasure, but not to the degree the first one and the first 4 or 5 would have
Right.
given me. So then I'm going to start to pick it up as a habit. Yeah. Oh, I like that. I'll have that. And there's going to be a point to which I keep having it and it stops being a surprise and the freshness has gone. So that's when the reward prediction error starts to come in. It just becomes a habit to keep finding this rewarding. So you'll stop paying attention to going to get it, to secure it. So when I'm training the dog to do something, if I over repeat something, at what point does go to the target, good, click, food, go to the target, good, click, food, go to the target. And now she's responding to the click, the good, the food as a habit. She's probably not paying attention to what she's doing. When she's not paying attention, she's gone into habit state. Respond to the cue, do the behavior, get some food. Respond to the cue, do the behavior, get some food. That is when the errors and mistakes will come in.
I think we do that.
So the people
We do that way more than we think we do, I believe.
Yes. So those people that fly your airplanes, do you want them to have habits or not?
Some the safety check. Oh, I know. I want them. I want them to
Exactly.
have the habit of doing the safety check, but still be in active learning state.
But that's not a habit. That's a
I
legal
know,
requirement. But
no.
no,
Oh,
no
okay.
habits. Thank you. No habits. Patterns I don't mind, but I don't want
Oh,
habits. And if you look at the bad weather and you go, oh, I don't really fancy flying in this weather, that is the weather to fly in, because I can tell you those pilots are going to be super, super alert, attentive.
oh,
They're going to make most of their mistakes when everything's just perfectly normal.
oh. I don't need to know that.
Oops. Yes. So bad weather flying, you go, yes, they're going to be awake. No, it's a thing of the industry, the repetitious nature of that job and the jobs that accompany it, like did they put enough fuel in? Did somebody check that that bolt was screwed up the right way? These are all things that end up becoming habits, and that loses your attentiveness and that loses its safety value. So somebody else has to check that you've checked and not just coasted.
So
be careful of habits, because yes, you want your dog to come to the car every day, yada, 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 until they don't. Until they're not paying attention, or as you just say to them, you open the car, you're expecting them to do it, so that becomes your habit to expect them to do it. And just as you're about to ask them to jump in, something runs out from underneath the car. Oops, you weren't paying attention, they're off, bang. Yes, or they mistimed the jump.
yeah.
Oops. Or, so yeah, be careful of what you ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Certain skills we want to stop being actively aware of, like those jumping skills perhaps, or the handwriting skills or the feed the dog skills. But that also means that they become vulnerable to error.
Okay, so you say a well designed training plan requires a few repetitions of the behaviors, always rewarded, maintaining the response habit. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
So,
So you want the dog to respond to what we're
okay,
doing. Yes.
okay, okay. Got that. All right.
When we're asking a dog to do something, even giving the dog a treat builds up a habit of looking to see what's
Okay.
coming next. What can
Okay.
I do next?
So
Yep.
make a habit of asking your dog, is this of interest to you? Yes. Yes. Okay. Then we move into active learning. And you say active learning is reliant on RPE activation. So they are oh, what do I have to do to get that? Oh, that was interesting. That whole process.
Yes, yes. And if you tend to, probably the things to be careful of is where you've got a treat and you're feeding it to the dog and every single element is identical. The food, the movement of your hand, the way the dog takes it, where the dog gets it, what the dog gets it for. That just yeah, and it goes round and round and round. Now the dog's going to go, yeah, whatever. They don't care how I do it. As long as I sit, I get a treat.
Mm.
So I'll sit
Mhm.
slowly. Oh yeah, she gives me a treat. I'll sit and I'll have a look at the birds. Oh yeah, she gets me a treat. You and me, we end up doing this mechanical, not paying attention to what we're feeding. So the quality of their behavior goes down the pan because that's our habit. Click, treat. Yeah, but what do you just click? I wasn't really paying attention.
Mm.
You just click the dog for getting to the target and paddling, or get to the target and then taking a step forwards. Oh,
Mm.
yeah. So it's both ends of that cycle.
Yeah. I think what's happening here is that we tend to focus on the dog, but what we're actually truly talking about is keeping active learning engaged in the person.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We tend to give the dog a treat. We can, So if I said to you, "How did your dogs eat their breakfast this morning?"
Yes. Eh,
Um, sorry, I didn't notice. I just put it on the floor and walked
yeah.
away. What were your dog's stools like this morning? I don't know. We just go into these habits of not being observant. So I was standing in the garden this morning. I know it's tea time for us, and there were dragonflies, and I'm going, I haven't seen those since last year. Are you with me? So that's like that changed standing in the garden because something about the environment was different than what it was yesterday. So, some people call it mindfulness, but anytime you train mindlessly, you're going to get into trouble.
Or, yes.
The same as you don't want those pilots to fly that airplane mindlessly, not like what we do with our car driving.
Okay. Yeah, I
You know,
think that I keep going back to this, but I think that we tend to focus too much on the dog, and we're not. I mean, we can never focus too much on the dog, in my opinion, but we do not focus enough on our own personal habits.
yeah. And anything that goes wrong is the dog's, not us. Could possibly be me.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
yeah,
no, no.
yeah. I mean, truly,
Yeah, and then he always is
truly,
first.
if I were to ask, if I walked into a class and I walked up to the instructor and I said, what are you finding today that this particular dog is finding valuable as a reward? They would be stumped. They like this treat. No, I mean, so that's where I think that we're failing our
Mm,
colleagues in
mm,
building those
mm,
skills.
mm. Well, we go into the habit of using the same treat delivered the same way. Oh, because he likes it. When did you last check? And even if you're teaching a physical skill or we're learning a physical skill like handwriting, as you go through life, a skill cannot stay the same because you get better at it or you get worse at it. But what it's not going to do is stay the same. And I'm sure, if somebody who'd never washed up before had to wash up, they would be so attentive to the whole lot. Or things like, in this day and age, washing our hands. How many of us have had to learn a different way of hand washing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have all this government things about how long you've
Oh
got to do the scrubbing here,
yeah.
scrubbing there, in here, out there, warm water, because this is your safety that might matter. So now we have to build a new habit. But 4 months ago, that would have been attentiveness. Now I'm sure people are back to washing their hands how they used to,
I
or not.
totally admit to that. I was at work on Saturday and I thought about, oh, you know what? My hand washing skills have gone downhill because I've
Yeah.
gotten safety.
So habits, yeah,
Mm.
habits. They have a bad rep. The reputation of a habit is, oh, you've got to build a habit of this, or you have a habit of that. It's something that's lacking your attentiveness, which can allow you to do other things. But also, there's times when you say, no, I must pay attention to my handwriting. It looks like pants. I can't read what I said. Let's pay attention
This
to
may
that for a
seem
while.
like a silly question, but since we can't have brain scans on our dog, what would you consider to be evidence of active learning?
Adapting what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think of a target. So one of the targets I tend to use is this shallow tub pot
The
the dog
pot.
has to
Mm-hmm.
stand in. Yep. And she can go from here, there, everywhere, get the pot, get the pot, get the pot. And I would say it starts to become a habit because as she's arriving, she tends to look at me, not the pot,
Ah.
i.e., she's looking for my
Uh-huh.
food. I'm here. Yes. So if I move the pot, or if I put the pot higher up, and she has to step up a couple of steps to put her feet in the pot, or go round something to get to the pot, or I change the surface of the base of the pot. Excuse me, it almost stops her forming a mindless repetition. She's got to keep paying attention because it's not the same each
Okay.
time.
Okay.
So, when they're attentive, or in other words, we drive attentiveness by asking for them to continually adapt that skill over the repetitions.
Okay.
So, in a way, the reward can often stay the same because the skill is having to be adapted each time.
So there should be two things in play at the same time. Like you say, you should have ensure that variable rewards are in play, and there's at times where you want that, and then the actual behavior itself. I mean,
The behavior, be careful of the behavior being variable. It needs to be
flexible, right? And
flexible.
what's the difference?
It's not a variable behavior. Variable is a different way of doing the behavior. Flexible is a different way of applying the same
Okay.
behavior.
Yeah. Like your pot example.
A little bit like generalization as opposed to application in different
Okay.
situations.
Okay.
I have a quote on that I cannot put my hand on at the moment.
All right. I think that my takeaway already this morning is just it's my morning, your afternoon, is
Hmm.
how much I have missed on the human side of this thing. I have to.
Well, yeah, but we teach people to train dogs. You don't train. Okay, if you're training your own dog, and at the same time, you have to be monitoring your own
Yes,
learning. You are your own learner. As you teach the dog, you are learning at the same time. And if you're not, you are not paying attention to what
yes,
you're doing.
exactly.
Video.
Ah,
Brutal.
yes.
I'm not doing that, am I?
You
Yes,
know,
I am.
all the
Gosh.
years that I've been watching people's training videos, does anybody wear shoes? Either barefoot,
No, not when you're home.
either that or your fabulous Crocs. Yes.
Well, yeah, more of a necessity than anything else,
Yes.
yes.
All right.
Indoor shoes, and outdoor shoes. You remember
Oh
those
yeah,
days,
yeah.
don't you?
I still believe in those. Absolutely. Oh, we're getting off on a tangent. But did you find your quote that you were
Hmm.
looking for?
Hmm. No, my
Okay,
brain's gone
that's
now.
okay.
I will
Okay, well
look it
you're
out though.
active though. You're actively seeking it. Okay, we have to talk about jackpots.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know it tends to be presumed that a jackpot can pay for a breakthrough moment, but it tends to bring in this question of why were we struggling to get a breakthrough moment anyway?
Mhm.
And in my experience, if I get a breakthrough moment and I go, whoopee, and shower the dog with food, they have absolutely no idea what they just
Uh-huh.
did.
Yeah.
So I'll often use a jackpot, or if I've got, say, 10 or 15 treats left in the pot, I will launch that out at the end of the training session if I'm in the garden, and she can go and hunt for that lot, because the end of the session tends to be a little bit of a moment. Yeah, so I'll use the jackpot because I'm going to do no further training. But if you've been paying, oh, here's one treat, here's one treat, here's one treat, here's 6 treats. Oh my goodness, says the dog. What did I do? Just earned 6 treats. Oh, was it this? And we're back to 1 treat.
You're going to get a depression.
What did I do wrong? And we've done that with the table game. This is one of the exercises, if you play the table game, where you can set somebody up where you build a pattern of paying them. So we use it with buttons, and you have some of these tiny little buttons that are shirt collar buttons, or very small buttons, and you pay them 5 buttons for doing something with an object on the table, and you pay them 5 buttons, and it's great. Oh, there's another 5 buttons. Cool. And now they're getting better at this. They don't really need 5 buttons because they're just, they've got it. You pay them 1 button, and they'll sit there and go, what have I done wrong? So that sudden depression from that high pay down to extremely low pay is like, whoa, what's gone wrong here? Why? So in a way, your reward prediction errors are light, but it doesn't mean they're going to get better at what they just did. They like to change what they just did.
And it really does impact subsequent repetitions. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then all that jackpot's just lost because they've now gone completely off track. So that up and downing of the reinforcer, the value of it to the dog, it needs to have variety, but it can't have these extremes that jackpots tend to bring in. You can have 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, so that's fine. Run for 1, catch 1, chase 1, that's fine. But if you went for, wow, you can have this entire sausage and you can run across the garden, if they come back and do the same behavior again and don't get that pleasure,
Ooh.
And it's not a question of, oh, well, the behavior deteriorates. You can see the dog's face. Are you with me? You don't need an MRI just to go, I think the brain's just gone, I'm not doing this again if that's what I'm going to get. Their face just falls like, really? But, if somebody was expecting a £10 tip for doing something and you gave them £1, oh, yeah, I've just reinforced it. I just rewarded you for doing that. You've just done that for me. Here's £1. Okay.
So let's talk about all the ways that we can keep active learning going. I mean, I think it's just unlimited. I love how you play with the cue and layering cues and all that stuff.
Yeah. And if I'm practicing, can you remember? The game is, how can I hide the cue that the dog has to go, gotcha. So I might put a book in front of my face and give the cue, the verbal cue. Or I might stand with my face to the wall and give the verbal cue. Or I might lie on the floor and give a signal, a hand signal. So I'm always trying to find games that challenge the dog's understanding of what they're doing, challenge the dog to be just on the edge of, don't tell me, I can do this. Yes, there's the answer. I got that one. Yay. So it's not about doing so much training every day. Yes, we need to build physical skill, and that's often that repetitious stuff, like running marathons. You just got to build up the muscle, the power to do it. But I'm not that I've ever run anywhere near like that. But when you're doing that physical building of a skill, you're often doing it mindlessly. It's not active learning, which is why people do the whole joggy runny thing so they can switch off.
Yes.
You see these films on television where it opens with a woman running in not many clothes and she's got earphones on, and you're going, ooh, she's not going to know what's happening around her because her mind is in a completely different place. And I'm going, danger.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whew. Oh, and I think that just to embrace this, people, it's playing with the cue and the cue hierarchies. It's playing with the delivery pattern. We've already talked about all this stuff, playing with the delivery patterns.
Yeah.
The behavior, the same action is happening, but there's so many other things that can happen around it that keep the variety.
The variety.
And I tell you that flies.
And for the airline pilot, the variety is the weather. that weather is always going to be, got to keep an eye
Yeah.
on it. Got to keep
Yeah.
an eye on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And running over hills is much more fun and interesting than running on a straight road.
Well, you can tell me. I don't know. I've never tried it. Certainly, yeah. I mean, I've done mountain rescue where I had to go up and down hills a lot. And over the years I did it, I got better at
Right.
doing it. But I can certainly say some of the mountain areas that we worked, you didn't do it mindlessly. Otherwise, you were falling
Right.
off, or breaking an ankle, or stepping on something you shouldn't have. You had to keep aware of it all the time, which then became 10 much harder to actually work the dog at the same time. So if you needed to focus on the dog, stand still. Tell the dog, do this, do this, do this, watch the dog, cool, move on. Yes. Don't try and be working the dog and walking at the same time, because one or the other is going to not have your attention.
Be careful that these changing contingencies are gradual and not significant or likely to disrupt the repetition or cause instability. And that's where our observation skills have to really be attentive. Have I
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
thoughtfully got this ball rolling, so to speak? And what are my signs that this dog is confident? And now at what point can I start playing with the edges, as I call it?
Yeah, and the competency, be it a person or a dog, most of us can handwrite with the right sort of pen on the right sort of paper and the desk at the right height. But the minute you say to somebody, "Hey, would you just write that on the wall?" There's still people today that pick up something and go and write on the wall, and they write it the same size as they would on the paper, and you're going, "I think it needs to be larger." Oh, I can't write larger.
Mm.
Okay, but if somebody's been teaching or writing on flip charts or, showing my age, chalk on a chalkboard, and it's just
Yeah.
writing, but the competency is about whether you can actually apply it to that situation. Yes, so if you can still do handwriting, it might not look the same because there's different contingencies on that. Writing vertically is not the same as writing
Oh,
horizontally.
absolutely.
Writing with a fat, marker pen is not the same as writing with a fine pen. Handwriting with a paintbrush is not the same as writing with a pen. Oh, but we can all handwrite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
But
have one
yeah,
of my people in my office do all my boards for me because I swear to God, she must have been an architect back in the day. You know how architects or draftspeople have that certain style of writing?
yes, you
Yeah,
have to. You have
yeah.
to.
She
Yeah.
does that so well. So I said, "You do it."
Yes. But even when I went into aviation, I was sort of 18, I had to learn to write numbers a different way. So a 4 had to be completely enclosed. You couldn't have an open
Uh-huh.
top. And a 9 and a 6 had to have curved edges. So they couldn't get mixed up with a G or a
Oh,
B.
okay.
And oh, goodness me. So, 15 years after I'd learned to write numbers, I had to write again. And I still write the numbers aviation style now.
Mm.
So as you say, and the architects or technical drawing skills requires you to write in a certain format that what's being written cannot be misinterpreted.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wow.
Pity they didn't do that in doctor school, isn't it?
They didn't do that to doctor school. Yeah. Um, so kind of wrapping this up a little bit. Do we want to talk about anticipation in this one? A little.
No,
Okay.
no, no, no.
Okay. Sorry, folks. You're going to have to take the course then to hear about anticipation. There's something to
Well,
anticipate.
yeah, it's a
Look
big
at
topic. It's a
look
big
what
topic.
we did. We actually engaged anticipation a little bit. For more information and links to articles and courses, be sure to take a look at the episode notes. Tell a friend, fellow trainer, or dog person to take a listen to the podcast. Thanks for listening.